Davante Adams is a Los Angeles Ram, and we are grading the signing. Also, more details on his contract and what will this mean for Cooper Kupp. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Ramley, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Rams, your daily podcast covering your Los Angeles Rams. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're also available over on YouTube, so if you haven't yet, do us a huge favor, join the party, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, and give us your reaction to the Rams signing Davante Adams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMAC_LA. I've been covering LA sports for a decade, 24/7 Sports, SI, Dodgers Nation, the Rams for Locked On. And as always, I'm joined by the Rams pre, half, and post-game show host for the Rams flagship radio station, ESPN 710 LA. He's going to be entering his 10th season covering your Los Angeles Rams, the people's champ, Mr. Travis Rogers. You can follow him on X at Travis Rogers. And on today's episode, we're going to continue to react to the news that the Rams are signing Davante Adams, take a deeper dive into the contract. Also, what's next for the Rams? How will he fit into this offense? But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. All right, Travis, so I came on, did a little 15, 20-minute instant reaction yesterday to the Davante Adams signing. Rams fans going crazy in shock, really. I mean, this kind of is a sign that truly indicates that they're all the way in on 2025. You brought back Matthew Stafford, essentially, even though he was a Ram, but him continuing his career here. One thing we talked about last week was part of that discussion had to be, okay, are you putting better weapons around me? Are we going to upgrade the wide receiver position? We've talked about over last year them interested in doing that, interested in guys like Mike Evans, trading up for Rome Odunze. Well, now the Rams get that premier top-level wide receiver that they've been after for the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, DMAC, this reminds me so much of their run to Super Bowl 56 a few years ago that it's really it's uncanny. And really the only remaining piece is to go out and find some elite defender that's displeased in wherever he may be in the middle of this season, because you look at the parallels between what the Rams are getting ready to do now and what they did then. They brought in Matthew Stafford. Now, they didn't have to bring him in, but they did need to bring him back. So I think that there's a lot of similarities right there. They went out and found a premium wide receiver that may not have been exactly what he was when he was at his absolute best. Of course, that was OBJ back in 2021. This is Davante Adams now. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's pretty darn close. You just need to go find whatever the 2025 equivalent of Von Miller is going to be, and who knows how this all comes together. I really like it. I think Davante Adams is an incredibly exciting player. We got to see him a little bit last year when the Rams played the Jets. I think this is kind of the proverbial home run hitter that the Rams have not had for a very long time. We'll see how he fits in here. I don't think it's a huge financial swing to go get him the way that they did. So I think they're kind of protected right there for that. They can basically get out of it after the end of 1 year, if that's in fact what it is that they want to do. If it doesn't work out, no harm, no foul. But I absolutely love it. And clearly the Rams think they're very, very close, because they're making moves that indicate that these are not moves for the next 3, 4, 5 years. These are moves for next season, this season, I should say, the 2025 season. And they clearly think that they're in the mix, and I agree.
Yeah, that's the first biggest thing for me is you mentioned the terms of the contract and the investment they have in Davante Adams. Well, the report comes down that's a 2-year deal worth $46 million with $26 million guaranteed. Yeah. But if you look at the deal, it's worth $44 million for 2 years with $26 million fully guaranteed. The base salary is $8 million in 2025, $18 million in 2026 with a $14 million cap hit this year. So if you just kind of look at the overall deal, it's essentially a 1-year, $20 million deal where the Rams can get out of it entering the 2026 season. So you look at a Davante Adams essentially on a 1 year, $20 million deal. If everything goes right, of course, and you want him back, and at the perfect scenarios, he plays to the point where he's back in 2026. Do you feel good about that? But Travis, most franchises that want to go all in, they have to commit long-term and essentially mortgage their future and go for these lean years in this dark rebuild because you're going all in on a quarterback or a receiver. They basically get to go all in with Matthew Stafford, Davante Adams, and other pieces while still having young emerging talent that's developing and not giving up too many assets at all for the future. So I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. And we'll talk about Davante Adams, what he is as a player, but you get that guy without having to do that. Let's say they go out and get a T. Higgins or someone like that, where you're really committing long-term and more dollars. It's just a different level of commitment that they don't have to do with Davante Adams. And Davante Adams just brings that juice, right?
He does. He absolutely brings that juice. And I kind of going back to what you were saying a second ago, Doug, this is a negative phrase, and I don't mean it negatively, so understand where it is. They've kicked the can down the road for another year as far as the window goes. They kicked the can down the road with Matthew Stafford, like basically, okay, here's your money for this year. We'll figure out next year. Here's Davante Adams' money for this year. We'll figure out next year. Because they got some guys that are coming up that they're going to have to pay before too long. Puka Nacua is on the near horizon. Jared Verse is on the further horizon. But these are guys that are going to be expensive. Some of those other defensive guys we're talking about, whether it's Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Byron Young, like you're going to have to make some decisions on some of these defensive guys when it comes to contracts before too long. And to your point, this is a really good way to do this. The Rams are going to be good next year. Now, how good? Time will tell. You got to get healthy. You got to be lucky, all of those things. But the pieces are in place for a run in 2025. But the pieces are also in place to kind of hit that button in 2026 if, in fact, they need to do it. If they do need to kind of retool at quarterback or wide receiver or whatever it may be, they're not locked in for a super long time in either one of those spots. So I think it gives them flexibility. I think it speaks to their creativity. I think it speaks to their understanding of windows better than most teams, because I agree with you. Usually, to kind of go for it, you got to commit some money beyond just the short term, and that's not what they've done.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Davante Adams, the player, and other reasons why this made a lot of sense, and also what this means for Cooper Kupp. Also, the Ramley wants to get thoughts on the bringing back of Tutu Atwell on that $10 million deal. But first thing, I got to, before we get to the break here, is he going to get Puka Nacua a Porsche like Shohei Ohtani got Joe Kelly a Porsche for that number 17? I've seen Photoshops of him in 15. It looks like Puka Nacua is safe with 17. But, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Puka's 17. There's this thing that I think we all kind of understand when you see it. Like when Shohei Ohtani shows up and Joe Kelly is the guy holding on to his number, Joe Kelly needs to give up the number. Now you can get a Porsche out of it. That's a pretty good deal. When Puka Nacua right now is the bigger star in the Los Angeles universe. Davante Adams may have a longer resume, may have done a few more things in this league over the years, but you just got here, bro, and Puka's had 17 for a while, so you're going to have to find a new number.
You have to find a number. I think he looks good in the 15 Photoshop. Yeah. He looks good in the Rams gear. And look, this is a Davante Adams player that I think at this point it's about fitting in versus just coming in and saying, okay, this is my team, this is my receivers room. And I think that's something that'll be a benefit to this Rams team, is going to an organization that has that foundation, has that culture, has that structure, coming from a dysfunctional Las Vegas Raiders, going to a dysfunctional Jets team. Now he gets to be with an A1 organization. We talked about it last week. He wanted to come to the West Coast. We mapped out Fresno to LA and just kind of coming back. No, he wanted to be a Ram, right? I think that is because where was he going to go? The Chargers, where was he going to go? The 49ers, right? The Seahawks, who trade away DK Metcalf and made some big moves. Yeah. It felt like this was very calculated from his end, that this was his number one destination, and that's where he ended up.
Yeah, I like how, what you said. I think it's interesting that, the Green Bay Packers obviously are an organization that functions pretty well and they make decisions. But the Aaron Rodgers of it all there with Davante Adams, they were a great combo together. But Rodgers is kind of on his own program. The Raiders are the Raiders. I don't think we need to add a ton of context to that. And then, of course, the Jets are the Jets, kind of similar to the Raiders. And I think everybody knows what that means. Davante Adams coming to the Rams, which is a team that functions properly, a team that has a chain of command that makes a lot of sense. A team that has powerful yet, executives, a powerful head coach, a powerful quarterback, but yet there's not a lot of drama. There's not a lot of noise that surrounds this. And I think Davante Adams will thrive in that environment, because I don't think that just by nature he's a particularly noisy guy, but when you're in a position, when you're on lousy teams that are run poorly, like the Raiders, like the Jets, there's stuff that just bubbles up naturally. I'm really excited to see him in an environment where the quarterback's on point, his counterpoint and Puka Nacua is on point, the head coach is on point, and everything just runs the way that it's supposed to.
And that's why it's tough, I think, to take his numbers and his performance and to use that as a true indicator of the player he is at this stage of his career, because of those organizations he's been in. But coming up next, we're going to take a look at it and where we think he has and how he can help this team. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible, and every file and every form will be filed, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. All so you can get the most money back, guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no excuses, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
And we are off and running here on Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a special shout out to those everyday listeners out there watching, listening to every single episode of Locked On Rams. And if you're a Rams fan, I mean, look at this ride we've been on. A 1-4 start to last season, to win the division, to win a playoff game, to the Matthew Stafford saga, Cooper Kupp. Now you decide Davante Adams, and they got free agency in the draft coming up. So join that Everyday Listeners Club. A never dull moment in Rams land, and you won't miss a thing about your favorite football team. All right, Travis, here in our second segment, picking up on Davante Adams. So we've been talking kind of about the player he is at this stage of his career. Last year, PFF gave him a 75.8 overall grade. That was 30 out of 98 receivers. 76.8 receiving grade. That was 30 out of 98. Had 85 catches on 135 targets. Put together another 1,000-yard season, 1,063 yards. Had 8 touchdowns. And this was missing time when he was with the Raiders with an injury where he basically just not really probably that injured, just did not want to play. Yeah. But part of the reason why I feel so good about this deal for the Rams end is you're getting, yes, a 32-year-old receiver, but you're also getting one that's been extremely dependable and one that's been very productive. He's had 1,000 yards in 6 of his last 7 seasons. And that one season where he didn't, he was 3 yards shy. He's had 1,000-yard seasons his last 5 years. He's still 14th in separation. He can still get in and out of his breaks, be that downfield threat that this offense has missed. And that's without playing with Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay and being re-energized with an incentive to play well to further his contract. So I think you're going to get a version of Davante Adams that's going to want to compete at the highest level for a Super Bowl, but also want to have his best showing so he can continue his career here.
Yeah, I think that's an important part of this. I think that his mindset, for lack of a better word, coming in is in the right spot. That, kind of going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, he's in a place that is going to operate the way that you would want to operate, right? There's not a lot. They're not going to be a Aaron Rodgers saga every single week. Now, he's obviously friendly with Aaron Rodgers and everything else, but just having that noise out of the building, I think, will be good. He's got a quarterback that is still able to throw it as well as anybody else. A head coach is going to put him in a position to succeed, I believe. I think the only question is there still a lot of juice in the tank? And I think there is, I'm really excited about this. I think that he's going to be a really good player for them. I think that this is a huge opportunity for him to go compete at the highest level, make maybe a run for the Super Bowl. This is probably, I don't want to say his last stop because he's not that old of a player, but it could be. It could be one of those stops where maybe one of the last stops where he's still Davante Adams and not, oh yeah, Davante Adams. The difference between those two things I think are pretty significant. We'll see, right? It's funny, Doug. I keep coming back to this. When the Rams signed Allen Robinson a few years ago, everyone was like, "Oh, this is going to be great." It was a disaster. He was just a complete non-factor. So I just have that little thought in the back of my mind that's back there. Davante Adams is a better player than Allen Robinson. Davante Adams, I think, is a better fit than Allen Robinson. But until you see it, you're just never quite sure what it's going to look like. I'm very optimistic. I'm hopeful. Like I said, all the pieces are there, but we'll see. I just, a player in his, he'll turn 33, I think, towards the end of this upcoming season. He's very skilled. He's very technical in what he does. So I think that that's going to continue to be effective. But, football players, wide receivers in particular, when they get into that, late to, how do you put this? Late, early 30s is if that's a thing that we can do, that's always okay. Let's see what it is. I'm very optimistic, but I'm excited to see it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, and I think with Allen Robinson, I mean, he had an interesting career, right? We had that early, really awesome season. Then he had a couple 1,000-yard years, and then he had the drop off, and then he signs with the Rams. I think with the Davante Adams, it's just, it's the consistency, the dependability. 2019 was the last year that he didn't play at least 14 games, and even that year he played 12 games. He plays. He's going to be on the field most likely, and he just at his peak. This is a 3-time All-Pro receiver, right? This is someone who really should be a Hall of Famer one day. And I also look at just the Rams in the red zone. I think about this piece and how this team would have looked with a Davante Adams in the last couple of seasons. And you look at the 2024 wildcard game in Detroit, struggling in the red zone, struggling to have a red zone threat. He helps you. We saw what they did with Sammy Watkins years ago and how you were able to take advantage of that. And even OBJ, when he comes in as someone that's a weapon in that part of the field to just kind of seal the deal and punch in those touchdowns and getting 7 instead of 3. And then you look at last year, this is a team that was 14 yards away from hosting an NFC Championship game. So they have been knocking on the door. And then you add this piece to this offense and you look at this receivers room, Puka Nacua and Davante Adams, it's like WR1 and WR1A, right? 2 top-level guys. Jordan Whittington can kind of do some of those things that Kupp did. We mentioned how Davante Adams doesn't do the run blocking like a Cooper Kupp does. He can do some of that underneath stuff, still move the chains. And the truth is, if you're the Rams, you're getting for essentially $30 million, Davante Adams and Tutu Atwell for what Cooper Kupp would have given you, which is, look at his production and the injuries and him not being available. It's just a massive upgrade at that position.
Yeah, it is. Their room is better today than it was yesterday. They're going to be in a really good spot next year. I think that, you bringing up Puka is interesting because not that it really matters all that much who is the designated WR1 or who's the WR2, whatever. But I think what is interesting is just, there is one football on every snap, and will he be comfortable not being that guy that is the number one guy time and time? Now, he might be the number one guy occasionally. If Puka goes down or whatever, obviously he ascends to that spot. But I still think when you look at Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua and the relationship and the rapport that they've been able to develop with one another, that's still at the top of the list. Now, maybe Davante Adams comes in and we have that, oh my gosh, right at training camp, it's just absolutely firing on all cylinders. That would be great. But you can only throw the ball one spot on each play, and you got 2 very good wide receivers. I think it's going to work. I'm excited to see it. But anytime that I'm just a little bit, I got my foot on the brake just a hair, D-Mac, because I've just seen this stuff and I'm like, oh, that's going to work for sure. And then you put it together and you're like, why doesn't that work so great? So I'm optimistic, but I'm just being a little cautious.
Yeah, nothing is fail-proof, right? Especially when you're a receiver above 30. I think what I feel great about is just the opportunity cost of it all. and
Yeah,
just
for sure.
it's worth the risk based on the contract situation. I mean, if you look at the Jets, I mean, the Jets got Davante Adams, they gave a 3rd-round pick and got like 2 more wins out of it, right? And then if you're the Rams too, because of that, you don't have to give any comp pick or anything like that, right? So there's always just little details that make this a smarter, more sensible signing for the Rams.
Well, I like what you said too. Look, they're a better team today than they were yesterday. They're a better team. I hate to say this out loud. I'm just going to say it. It's a massive upgrade over Cooper Kupp at this point. You know what I mean? Like it really is. Cooper Kupp is he's going to have a statue. He's going to have his number retired, Super Bowl MVP. Check all the boxes to make sure that we all know that we all love Cooper Kupp. Davante Adams is a better football player at this point in his career. He just is. And so I think that we're going to see that come, at the end of last season, like you're talking about. Do you have 1 weapon on the field or 2? Do you have 3 weapons on the field or 4? Like it just gives you a whole, and it gives you kind of that home run hitting element that the Rams really have not had for a while. And I'd like to see Sean McVay play with that a little bit. We've always wanted kind of Tutu to be that guy, and just really hasn't come together quite like the way that you would anticipate. But with Davante Adams, it might.
Yeah, no, it really does feel like that for Cooper Kupp. It's just weird to be excited, but you're kind of in your feels because it's essentially just completely ends any chance that he had. It does feel like it feels like Andy's nightmare in Woody's nightmare in Toy Story, where Andy says, I don't want to play with it anymore, and he drops him, and then Woody falls through those aces, and he falls with those like dead toys, and it's just like his nightmare. And then you got Davante being Buzz Lightyear. But coming up next, we're going to talk a little Cooper Kupp and what's next for the Rams. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams.
March Madness is here, and FanDuel's giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. And right now, if you are a new customer, you can get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is cutting down the nets. And oh, by the way, you still got your NBA and your NHL and everything else that you want to get in on FanDuel, right? But I bet you've got your eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it super easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props, everything that you can think of. And the tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app, as you know, simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There is no waiting around at all. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com.
And welcome back to Locked On Rams. Thank you for making Locked On Rams your first listen every single weekday. Free and available every year podcast. Locked On Rams, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Davante Adams, he is a Los Angeles Ram. By the way, just kind of before you get this, Travis, like, how about this fact that the Rams are the talk of the NFL? Like this whole offseason, like there's a universe where they finished last in the NFC West. They missed the playoffs, and we're like in like the deepest, darkest, like ugliest stages of like, we're gonna do our 6th round mock today. Like, you know what I mean? Like we could have been doing an offseason talk for months and months since October, and they made the playoffs. They won a playoff game. Matthew Stafford's situation, Kupp situation, Davante Adams, free agency draft. It's like the Rams are like so incredibly relevant, and it's great to see, especially in a town like Los Angeles, where you're gonna be an afterthought if you're not competing for titles.
Can I just put a pretty fine point on this? You know who gets the vast majority of the credit for what you just described? Sean McVay. Because like you said, this team was 1-4 and looked really busted. Like they just did not look like they were going to be able to find their way out of this. And they started to play a little better. And more than anything else, they never rolled. And you see it all the time in the NFL where guys, it's like, okay, it's not going to happen. Let's start you trade. Look, they were this close. You know, they were thinking about trading Cooper Kupp away. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, we won another game. Let's keep it going. All right, let's keep him here. And things just started to progress from there. But when you have a coach like that, when you have a an entity in your building that keeps everybody together, even when things are going as badly as they were. And by the way, it's the last couple of years they've gotten off to some bad starts along the way. And then you get buy-in and you get belief and things start to go, that you do get into the playoffs, that you do win the division, that you do win a playoff game, that you are, what did you say, 19 yards away from hosting an NFC championship game, that you can run it all back again and then go out and sign a player like Davante Adams. You hold on to your first round draft pick, you get your quarterback back. They were this close to us talking, like you said, about, all right, can they move out of that 26 spot? Can they move into the top two or whatever it may have been? And now we're talking about, can they run it back like they did in Super Bowl 56? Because it feels pretty darn similar.
Yeah, you got to give all the credit to Sean McVay for so many things within this organization, but certainly this one. There were tons of reports that Sean McVay was so involved in the recruiting process for Davante Adams over the weekend. So I can only imagine just what that was like from Davante Adams' end, to just see basically the sales job that Sean McVay put on him, the recruiting job. I was almost thinking of,
I bet he's pretty good at that too, huh?
Yeah.
I bet if Sean McVay is telling you he likes you, I bet that's a pretty powerful message.
It's got to be, this is a guy who will never, ever touch a clipboard at the college level, right? Because he's Sean McVay. But it almost kind of made me think of like, oh, is this the closest he gets to being that like premier college football coach recruiting a 5-star recruit? Like, was he doing full-blown Nick Saban, doing the Cupid shuffle in families' living rooms to try to impress their aunties and uncles to try to get that recruit? But he clearly put on the full court press and it worked. But Travis, I also got to get your opinion on the Tutu Atwell re-signing at $10 million. I mean, I came on the next day and I said, look, this is not wide receiver 2 money, so don't expect him to be your wide receiver 2. They're still going to go out there and get a guy. So as a complimentary piece, I mean, to think of a guy 5 touchdowns in 4 years for that money, it kind of made people scratch their heads. It was surprising. It was more surprising they did that than even get Davante Adams, essentially, for some people. But what are your thoughts on the Tutu Atwell re-signing?
It's fine. You know what I mean? Like I've talked about Tutu a lot on this podcast. The everydayers know my feeling. I'm not the biggest Tutu Atwell fan in the world, but he's not completely without use. You know, he brings some things. He'll draw a PI penalty down the field occasionally. He still does have that elite speed that keeps defenses honest. And I think most importantly, you touched on it, Doug, it's not an expensive move. 1 year, $10 million. It's a pretty easy one. He wanted to stay. They wanted to keep him. It's not something that's going to break your budget or your cap or anything like that. So it's fine. It's one of the, I've always said this. I've said this on my radio show. I said it here. If I say something's fine, it means it doesn't really matter. It's fine. Sure. How was that meal you had last night? Oh, it was fine. It's like, it's not good. No, it's not bad. It's fine. I'm not hungry anymore. And that's, I think, what Tutu's signing is for $10 million. It's fine.
I thought I had a chorizo burrito last night.
No, that's good.
It was fire.
That's good.
Yeah, it was really good. But yeah, I mean, I did say we grade the signing. I give it a Davante. Okay, no, okay, Styles. No, I'll leave. I'll show myself out. But based on the price, based on the commitment, based on the players, based on what this Ram needs, based on where Matthew Stafford is, I think it has to be an easy A grade of a signing for me.
Yeah, I give it maybe an A- just because of his age, but I think it's really good. And look, until we see it, it's all just theoretical. And this could turn into an A+ like that. It could also turn into something less than an A if he's just not quite the Davante Adams we think of in our mind. But I think it's going to be. I'm super excited about this. I think that it was. I like it because of who he is. I like it because of the sort of player he is, but I like it because the Rams like it. You know what I mean? Like if they're on it and Sean McVay's on it and Les Snead's on it and this is what they want to do, my faith is in those guys. They've shown that they get way more right than they get wrong, and that they're on this makes me very excited.
Yeah, Wise Man once said, I think his name was Travis Rogers, if the Rams like it, we love it. Yep. And it's another example of that. But tomorrow we're going to talk about how this will impact what the Rams do in the draft. Should they go all in on another offensive player at another position? That'll be for tomorrow's episode. But that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Rams. My name is Doug McCain. You can follow me on X and Instagram at DMac_LA. You can follow the People's Champ, Mr. Travis Rogers, at Travis Rogers. And until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.